My name is Jenny Kimball. I'm the College and Career Advising Program Manager at the Office of the State Board of Education. I am very excited about our webinar today. At the Office of the State Board, we are lucky to have a partnership with the National College Attainment Network, better known as NCAN, and they are really experts in the area of FAFSA completion and have really helped us start to prepare for the changes that are coming next year. And so I'm really excited to have them joining us today. But before we get into the FAFSA information, I just wanted to really quickly make sure that everyone out there is aware of our upcoming regional workshops. Hopefully you're aware that in each region, we have a Next Steps Idaho ambassador who is charged with planning an in-person event for their region. And that event is really just about professional development and connecting with each other. So on the screen, you will see the dates and locations for each of our regions. Hopefully you have received an invite to your region's professional development day. Most likely, if you're in region 5 or 6, you haven't seen that yet, just because those are coming up at the end of April. But you should be seeing those soon. Region 2, we didn't think we were going to be able to plan one in region 2 because our ambassador actually left and took a new job. But LCSC has stepped up and has planned an event for us. So that information should be coming out soon if you live in region 2. On the Next Steps Idaho website, on our calendar, if you go to our calendar page, that's where you will find the registration links for each one of these events if you have not received one in your email inbox. As we transition into our topic for today, which is, of course, looking at next year and the changes that are coming out of the FAFSA Simplification Act, I am very excited to have Bill DeBaun with us. He is the Senior Director of Data and Strategic Initiatives at NCAN. Like I said, NCAN stands for the National College Attainment Network, and we have been partnering with them this year, and we're just so grateful for their expertise and their guidance. I will just preface for Bill that because the FAFSA has not been released yet, we do not know every little detail of what the new FAFSA will entail, and there may be questions that we cannot provide answers for today, but we're going to compile those questions and make sure that as more information is provided from the Department of Ed, that we hopefully can provide you with those updates. But the purpose of today's webinar is really just to give you some ideas about the kind of overall, the big changes that are coming, how you can possibly prepare for what those changes might mean for you and your students and your families that you serve. And like I said, I will be monitoring the chat to try to answer any questions along the way. So with that, let's see if Bill is ready.
I am. Hello, everyone. I cannot right now share my screen, though, is the only thing, Jenny.
Okay.
Yes, here we go.
Okay, excellent. I will stop sharing.
Oh, unmute. Okay, hello. All right. Wow, I've been promoted. It's always good to start your morning with a promotion. That's awesome.
For sure. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill. We're super excited. I don't know if excited is the right word. Maybe we're a little nervous, but we're excited that you want to share with us these.
Well, I hear both of those emotions. I am having trouble still screen sharing, though. You can see me.
Try it now.
All right. Oh, I'm the host now. Okay.
Now you've got all the power.
All right. Okay. How's that looking?
We can see it. Excellent. Thank you.
All right, great. And you can hear me, all that good kind of stuff.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. All right, so Jenny, thank you very much for the warm introduction. Thank you everyone for being here. It is really exciting to start my morning with you. So FAFSA changes are coming. I could have put a lot of exclamation points there. I decided to be, I restrain myself and just put the one, but there are a lot of changes, and I'm going to walk you through some of them. My name is Bill DeBaun. As Jenny said, I'm a Senior Director of Data and Strategic Initiatives here at NCAN. I've been at NCAN for almost 10 years and really excited and passionate about the work that we do. If you don't know about NCAN, let me tell you a little bit about us. We're a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit member organization. Our members are all across the country, and they are all shapes and sizes. We have small college access programs, we have large state agencies, and everything in between. We have K-12 school districts, we have funders, we have higher ed institutions, but we're all kind of united around this idea of helping students find their next best post-secondary pathway. We do our work largely through helping our members become the best version of themselves that they can be through, for example, technical assistance like this. We also advocate for policy changes at the federal and state level that help to bring down barriers for students. And we also support systems change. What that means is that we're trying to grow the field, right? We're trying to bring more people into the circle of organizations and advocates that help students with college career readiness. And that's largely where my work tends to fall. And so it's really great to have partners like Jenny and the state board, right, who are so helpful in increasing kind of capacity within and across states for doing this kind of work. So here's my agenda today. I hope that it will line up with yours. I want to provide some insight into the forthcoming Better FAFSA. And Better FAFSA is what federal student aid is the new moniker for the streamlined FAFSA that we've been talking about. And so when you hear me talk about Better FAFSA, please understand this is not an editorial decision on my part. I am not making a value judgment about the nature of the forthcoming streamlined FAFSA. I am going along with the branding that we have here. So I want to tell you a little bit about what's changing and what you need to know. I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, but I have a little bit of trepidation with this second item here on my agenda. Because my experience with the Better FAFSA presentations is that people tend to bring a lot of questions to the Q&A. And so I'm going to give myself a little bit of a safety net with item number 3 here and say that I will commit to you, I will take any questions that I can't answer today, and there will be some, I guarantee you that there will be some. I will take any questions that I can't answer today, and I will get you answers via email in a timely fashion, right? So that means like probably by Monday COB, I will have answers to you. And I'll compile them all, I'll send the answer to Jenny, and Jenny can send them out to you, and we'll get there. So I apologize in advance for anything that I can't answer for you, but I will do my best to get you an answer in a timely fashion. Okay, so let's just level set here about the FAFSA, right? The FAFSA is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about. But the FAFSA is not, or I would contend to you, should not be the end-all be-all goal here, right? The FAFSA is so valuable because what it represents, right? The FAFSA represents kind of student post-secondary demand for post-secondary education, right? It's the best leading indicator that we have, especially for high school seniors, about what their post-secondary intentions are. And we can see here a really strong association between FAFSA completion for high school seniors and immediate college enrollment. And that association is stronger for students who are coming from higher poverty school districts, right? Because FAFSA is the key that unlocks the door to federal financial aid, the Pell Grant, subsidized and unsubsidized student loans, but also to many state grant aid programs, right? And without that financial aid, given the nature of post-secondary affordability in this country, students can't afford post-secondary education. So we see the association here at the district level. We see the association here for states, right? Where we see the June 30th FAFSA completion percent for a state, and then the percent of high school graduates going directly to college. And we have pretty steep slopes here for the high school classes of 2016 and 2018. I would love to get some more updated data for high school classes, and hopefully the next time you see me, I will have it. So we think about kind of FAFSA completion as being the canary in the coal mine for post-secondary enrollment. I actually probably need to get a more optimistic analogy. I borrowed this for the classes of 2020 and 2021. Things have actually gotten much more optimistic for the classes of 2022 and increasingly the class of 2023 in terms of what the national FAFSA completion landscape looks like. But you can see here that the national FAFSA completion rate and the year-over-year FAFSA percent change they're pretty, the direction and magnitude of those changes are pretty tightly tied with what the national first fall enrollment rate is, right? And so, we have, for the class of 2022, I don't have the class of 2022 first fall enrollment rate yet, but I will say that for all first-time enrollers for this past fall semester, for fall 2022, kind of first-time enrollers nationally, was up something like 3.3 or 3.7%, right? So that's good, right? And kind of ties the association together. Okay, so now that we're kind of all on the same page about why the FAFSA is important, why we're going to talk about it for the next 40 some odd minutes. What is on the horizon for the Better FAFSA? Okay, so let's just get this right out in the open. This is the big ticket item. This is the $64,000 question. When will the 2024 and 25 academic year FAFSA open? We don't know yet. Okay. Normally, we all know the FAFSA opens on October 1st, right? It has done that for 6 years or so now, right? But getting Better FAFSA online is a really heavy lift for federal student aid. They are changing a lot of like the back-end data architecture, and there's a lot of moving parts to this whole piece, right? And so FSA is already kind of signaled to the field that it may not open on October 1st, 2023, and it could be delayed to as late as January 1st, 2024, right? So we have heard that the FAFSA will open Q4 2023. Little calendar trivia for some of you out there. December 31st, 2023 is still in Q4 of 2023, right? So we could go as late as that and still be opening in Q4 2023. So we hope to have a firm opening date later this spring, and that would be really good for planning purposes, right? So that we can start to kind of shift our practice, our rollouts of all the different kind of FAFSA completion campaigns that schools and districts, communities, states have for driving FAFSA completion. So that said, we are suggesting that you start thinking about contingency planning. Now, it's a little bit difficult to do that when you don't know what the exact date is, right? But you should plan that you should not plan around an October 1st opening. That is my advice to you. Start thinking about how do we shift back timelines? How can we build in flexibility in some of this practice, right? Who do I need to talk to institutionally, right? For the institutions to which my students matriculate, right? About how, if at all, this affects their plans. We're going to talk about this later, but how do we train staff to understand kind of the nature of the new Better FAFSA, right? Like we're not going to have training materials until much later this spring, and NCAN is going to be putting out a ton of training opportunities virtually for counselors. But it is good to have on your radar, right, that there's going to be a lift here on the professional development side to understand what the new FAFSA is going to entail. And so that's all I know in terms of the opening of the FAFSA. Okay, so let's talk about the actual Better FAFSA itself here. All right, let me give you some of the big ticket things here. So major aspects of the FAFSA Simplification Act of 2020. So expected family contribution, EFC, is getting replaced with something called the Student Aid Index. Not only will students and families see a different measure of their ability to pay for college, they are going to experience a change in the methodology used to determine aid. So the new need analysis is going to remove the number of family members in college from the calculation. It will allow the minimum student aid index, the SAI, to go to negative 1,500. And it will also change, it will implement separate eligibility determinations for Pell Grants. We'll talk about that a little bit down the line. So the SAI is going to have fewer factors in the formula than the EFC does, which means that we're going to have fewer questions on the FAFSA, which is good, right? We're talking about streamlining the FAFSA. That's what our verbiage has been around the FAFSA Simplification Act. And it also means that we're going to have a higher share of FAFSA responses can come from federal income tax returns, right? Again, this is a streamlining of that process. The reason why the SAI can go negative is that it allows for differentiation of students who, under current law, may all have an EFC of 0. Right. So when we can better differentiate among different low-income students, that can help schools kind of more precisely target aid, a campus-based aid, and institutional aid to those students. We are also going to expand Pell Grants, right? So the FAFSA Act is going to expand the Pell Grant to more students and link eligibility to family size and the federal poverty level. Right, so I have some brand new modeling about the expansion of the Pell Grant. I'm going to show you in just a couple slides. We will, I mentioned that we will be streamlining the FAFSA form. It's going to reduce the number of questions from 108 to 36. I will say that some of these questions have multiple parts, right? So there are like different components in some of these questions. And so you may not, you may have like one question with 8 subparts. Whether or not that counts as 8 separate questions or not is like a matter of debate we could talk about. But in any event, we will be reducing the number of questions quite substantially from 108 to 36. Okay. So one of the big things on this streamlining of the FAFSA form is that everyone, and you see that it's all caps and bold, so that really, will be required to click a permission box at the beginning of the FAFSA process now that is going to allow tax information to be transferred into the FAFSA form. This includes non-tax filers, right? And so this new process really requires bringing in IRS data whenever possible. Okay, there are very, very few paths now under the Better FAFSA for people to manually enter their financial data. Okay, so that is a big change from the current FAFSA where people are inputting a lot of information if they're not using the IRS data retrieval tool. And I already mentioned the number of questions has been reduced here. So in doing this, in bringing the data in from the IRS, that's going to confirm non-tax filers and will hopefully eliminate kind of the non-tax filer letters that are often required through the verification process now. So that will eliminate one part of the verification process. That's really great. One piece here is that everyone with a separate tax form will have to log in and grant permission, right, during the FAFSA process, right? So we're talking about multiple FSA IDs, those kinds of pieces. At no point during completing the form, either on the FAFSA summary or on the SAR, will you see the numbers transferred. You will just see transferred from the IRS, and there will not be an opportunity to make corrections to those numbers, as we understand it. Talked a little bit about the Student Aid Index already. Again, this is the new name for the EFC, and part of the reason for the change, right, is that the EFC, as advocates and counselors know, it's kind of a misnomer, right? A lot of families see the EFC and they say there is no actual way that I can afford to make this contribution that the estimated family contribution says that I should be able to make, right? So part of this is kind of shifting the messaging here about what the SAI represents, but again, it also allows, by allowing the SAI to go negative, also allows the lowest income students to receive aid in excess of an institutional cost of attendance. Okay. One keynote here: non-tax filing families will receive the automatic negative 1,500 SAI, which will translate to a maximum Pell Grant. Okay, so this is brand new here. I was on a webinar yesterday with SHIO, the State Higher Education Executive Officers, and they modeled the change from EFC to SAI. I find this very interesting. I'm not going to go super deep in the weeds here, but they have data from 30 states, right? And they use data from federal representative surveys, and they tried to look at, okay, what will it look like under the SAI for students making the shift from EFC to SAI? And so this is a crosstab here of Pell eligible and non-eligible students under the new and old formulas. And so you want to look at these kind of down the columns, right? And so this is like really eye-popping to me, and I would encourage you to go and look at the rest of the SHIO report. But so looking at these first two columns here, what this is saying is that under the old formula, we're looking at these 4.8 million students in their sample who were non-Pell eligible. 43% of them become eligible for some Pell under the new formula, right? That's where the gain Pell 43% box is there. And so the second column here under the Pell eligible old formula header, just 0.1% of students who were eligible under the old formula will lose eligibility under the new formula, right? So this to me represents a potential really large expansion of Pell Grant eligibility, which will hopefully make post-secondary pathways much more accessible for students. So again, this is brand new data. I saw this yesterday afternoon, knew I was doing this today, wanted to pull in some of this information. One other chart here that I want to show you from SHIO. So this is the x-axis here, the horizontal is expected family contribution numbers. And then the vertical axis, the y-axis, is the simulated student aid index. This dotted line here, the black dotted line, is the slope of where EFC would equal SAI, right? And so we can see that under about $11,000 here on the EFC, the SAI is much lower, right? So we're talking about kind of the Pell Grant and federal financial aid increasing for students under a baseline EFC of 11,000, right? That's what all these dots here before the red line under are representing, right? Is relatively more generous financial aid for students. Again, I really like the SHIO piece here. I think it's very interesting. It's the first modeling that I've seen of the new financial aid, of the new SAI. Okay. So there are some formula change implications, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these. I've got 10 changes coming up here. I don't want to read this to you word for word. You're going to get the deck from Jenny. But some big ticket items here is that with number in college removed from the formula, students may see their SAI double or triple with no change in family income, right? So where we used to be dividing the EFC by number in college, we're not doing that any longer, right? And so that will have pretty big implications for the student aid index. How states are going to adjust to the shift from EFC to SAI kind of remains to be seen. That's going to be on a state-by-state basis in terms of how state financial aid programs currently tie in EFC or Pell Grant eligibility. So that's something to be on the lookout for. There are questions we have about whether or not colleges are going to adjust kind of institutional aid so that students, awards can remain the same so that students don't have to stop out because of lack of affordability. Families with an adjusted gross income greater than $60,000 will be required to report assets through the FAFSA now. Currently that's a $50,000 threshold. And there are some outstanding questions on reporting all business net worth, family farm values. This is not an area that I know a ton about, to be completely honest with you, but I suspect that there are some implications here in Idaho, and so I will try to get you some more information about that. But I know there are questions about how do we calculate farm net worth, right? Because that is it's kind of a sliding scale. I mean, it's not an exact science on estimating the net value of farms, and so we do have some questions here about how SAI is going to tie in with family farms and how colleges can or will consider that as a special circumstance when considering packaging a student for financial aid. Okay, so now I've got 10 more changes that you should know about coming in to the Better FAFSA. I will try to move through these quickly so that we can get to Q&A. Number one thing, everybody needs an FSA ID. Everyone who wants to put information into the online FAFSA will need an FSA ID to access the form. FSA has indicated that they are creating a process for people without social security numbers to create an ID and to be able to access the FAFSA. And an FSA ID will need to be created and confirmed prior to accessing a FAFSA. Okay, everybody needs an FSA ID. Start thinking about it now, right? Start thinking about how to message that to parents and students now. Speaking of an FSA ID needing to be confirmed prior to accessing a FAFSA, the FSA ID will now have multi-factor authentication. We all know about multi-factor authentication now in the year 2023, where we get a code sent to us either via our phone or our email. We have to confirm that. We highly recommend that people take advantage of every type of verification available. That's email, text, authenticator apps on your phone if you're much more technologically savvy than I am. All these options, take advantage of them. The reason we say that to make sure that you're putting in an email, a phone number, using authentication apps, is that it will make the two-step verification process easier, right? It also means that students and their parents or spouses will need to be in contact with each other while they're going through this if they are trying to help complete information for other roles, right? So if you have a student who's kind of filling in information on behalf of their parent, and I don't want to get into the propriety of doing that, but logistically speaking, to help complete something for another role, you will have to be able to get like through the MFA process, right? So that you can log in. I already mentioned this change, but it's worth noting here again. Number in college is not going to be a factor under Better FAFSA. So the student aid index will no longer be divided by the number in college. Students with multiple siblings in college have the potential to have a much larger SAI with no change in actual income, right? We're moving from EFC to SAI. Household size. Throw out your household size t-shirts. Get your family size t-shirt ready. The new name for household size is family size in the Better FAFSA, and it will be determined by the number of exemptions claimed on federal tax returns. Because family situations can change, there will be a question that allows the student to modify the family size to reflect the current number. We suspect that there may be a high percentage of families who use that question to change family size. For example, to accommodate births, deaths, college graduates, criteria in divorce decrees, tax filing choices, right? And so there will be an option or an opportunity to change family size here. The new definition of which parent information belongs in the form, that may or may not be the custodial parent. And that understandably may cause some tense situations between students and parents. It may modify eligibility for students. Parent info, or for which students' parents, it may modify which students' parents' info needs to be provided on the FAFSA, because that parent may no longer be the primary custodial parent. The new definition is the parent which provided the greater portion of the student's financial support. So that is a change on the Better FAFSA that may come into play for many families. Current college students may need to change which parent to report, right? So if you were doing the old FAFSA a certain way, reporting on a certain parent's income on your FAFSA, that may change now on the Better FAFSA, and so that is something that kind of current college students may need to be aware of. The number of colleges listed on the FAFSA is going up. It's being expanded from 10 to 20. So that students will be able to send more information to more colleges much easier through the FAFSA completion process. Number 6, if a student begins the FAFSA, they will be asked to identify the parents, or spouse who will be contributing financial information on the form. And that information will contribute to different people's roles in completing Better FAFSA. It is critical that they enter those persons' information. So, grammatically, wow, that was rough. I could have written that differently. In any event, the people who are going to be helping to complete the FAFSA, their information needs to appear exactly as it appears in the FSA ID. so that they'll be able to log in, right? We don't want any mismatches between who you're saying is going to help you complete the form and then what that person's information is on their FSA ID, because that will cause a big headache. Consequently, right, because we're identifying people's roles, we also have role-based forms for the Better FAFSA. So each person role on the Better FAFSA will only be able to see questions related to their role. When a student logs in, they will only be able to see questions that should be answered by the student. The parent or spouse will need to log in to see questions related to their own role. And only once the appropriate people have completed the questions for their role will the FAFSA be able to be submitted. Okay, so it used to be that a student could see, kind of much more than just the questions they needed. That is changing, right? It's something that we need to be kind of thoughtful about when we're helping students and families complete, because to get a FAFSA all the way to completion, you're going to have multiple roles on hand. Assets, I mentioned this briefly earlier. Families with adjusted gross income of greater than $60,000 is increased up from $50,000, or those who filed certain schedules in their taxes will be required to submit assets. There are no exemptions for reporting net business or family farm value. And so current FAFSA filers may see an increase in their student aid index due to having to report all business or farm net values with no change in income. I've talked a fair bit about negative student aid index already, so I will not belabor that again. And so some items that are no longer required under Better FAFSA. We have done away with the selective service question, the drug conviction question, cash support and other money paid on behalf of the students. So 529s that are in other people's names no longer required here. Veterans education benefits not required. Workman's comp. So there are a number of things that are no longer required, and the hope is that this will streamline kind of the FAFSA completion process. Now, I told you 10, giving you a bonus change. Okay, in case you didn't get enough on the FAFSA changes through this webinar, I'm going to go all the way to 11. This webinar goes to 11. Hopefully there are some people on this who get the reference. Pell Grant eligibility will continue to be calculated based on the SAI, but will also be calculated using federal poverty tables and the family makeup, size, and income related to those tables. If the student meets the poverty table guidelines for the maximum or minimum Pell award and the SAI calculation, the student will be awarded the highest Pell Grant amount determined by the two separate formulas. This is like very in the weeds. The thing that you really need to know is that there's two ways to get the Pell Grant, to qualify for the Pell Grant. And if you qualify under both definitions, under the federal poverty table and under the new SAI, students are going to get the most generous Pell Grant for which they're eligible. Okay, that's the piece that really need to take away here. Okay. Woo. All right, rounding into home. Considerations for counselors. This first one's a little bit of a bait and switch, I'm sorry. You may wish to update right now any resources, presentations, or college information for your current juniors. You may wish to do that. You may not be able to because we don't have all the information that we need to probably do it, but you may still wish to do it. You may wish to consider holding a financial aid information night this spring and next fall. Okay, so that depends on when we can get the information that we need to kind of put out a Better FAFSA financial aid night. This one is very actionable. Encourage households with two parents to each get an FSA ID so that either or both can complete the FAFSA. Signing up an FSA ID is something that we can do now. Good idea to go ahead and start laying some of the groundwork on that front. If you have students, older college students, it may be good to let them know that what the FAFSA process was last year, previous years before, when you were going into college, things are changing, and warn the parents of current seniors that what happens this year will be different than next year, right? Because we're in kind of this interstitial, very transitory space. All that said, given all the changes that are going on, the FAFSA completion materials that you have for the class of 2023, our advice is to recycle them, throw them out after graduation so that we don't get those things commingled with whatever the advice is going to be the class of 2024. Sign up for every training or webinar offered next year when much more information will be available. So NCAN will be putting on lots and lots of training webinars over the summer and into next fall, probably well into next academic year. I'm sure Jenny and her team will also be doing something similar, specific to Idaho. But please know there will be just a ton of opportunities to learn about better FAFSA. We're putting together kind of trainings. We're very aware that this is a heavy lift, right? That every counselor and advocate is going to have to learn a new process, and we want to make sure that we are providing all the opportunities that we can to get you trained. And then the last thing here is that warning principals, superintendents, any of the quote unquote powers that be, that there will be a need for PD time around this next year, right? So there's a lot of changes coming. Just let them know, hey, put this on the radar now so that we can start to bake that in. Okay. Now it's your turn. Your questions, comments, ideas. As I said, I try to leave plenty of time for Q&A, and I will do my very best to answer your questions. And if there are any that I don't know, again, I beg your forbearance, and we'll get your questions as soon as I can. So Jenny, let me stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. I imagine that a lot of you are sitting out there just sort of a little overwhelmed.
Sorry about that.
I think that's how I felt like the first time, especially if this is like kind of your first intro into the FAFSA changes. You might just be like, I don't even know where to start. But yes, Janelle, if you could put your questions into the chat, that would be great, or the Q&A, either one. I have them both open. So, so Katie has asked, Bill, do you know what the highest Pell Grant offer will be? I know it was increased for this academic year. We typically see an increase every year. Can you remind us what the max Pell amount is right now?
I should know this off the top of my head. Give me 1 second and I will get it for you right now.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. I know it's 7,000 something. I was really excited when I saw it, but
It's
can't remember.
$73.95.
$73.95. Perfect. I'll put that in the chat just in case. Max, and that would be for this year's seniors. So for the class of 2023, that is the max Pell amount. Sorry, can you say that one more time, Bill?
$7,395.
And just to reiterate that amount typically is reviewed by Congress every year and typically does see an increase every year. So that probably will not be the max amount for the class of 2024, but we just always have to wait.
Okay. I will say that NCAN is always advocating for increases to the Pell Grant. We would love to see the Pell Grant doubled. While I'm here, I guess I might as well put a plug in for that to restore the purchasing power. But yeah, we don't know exactly what we'll be able to get out of Congress next year.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, can you clarify FSA ID needing to be confirmed, not pending? So it sounds like what you're saying is like a student could not sit down and create their FSA ID and then immediately start their FAFSA. Like that could not happen at the same time.
My understanding from what I've heard from my colleagues, right, is that the FSA ID will need to be confirmed before starting the FAFSA. And my understanding, again, is because so much of the information is being pulled in from the IRS, is that they can't do the process of pulling in your tax data from the IRS until they confirm that the FSA ID is yours. As
I'm thinking about like myself as a prior high school counselor, so often I would tell students ahead of time, like, get your FSA ID done, get it done before FAFSA night. And we all know like half of them would show up and not have it done. It could be that if that's the case this year, that if a student shows up to FAFSA night and they haven't created their FSA ID, that they wouldn't actually be able to do their FAFSA because it would take a few days for it to be confirmed. So I think possibly building into your college application week, like when students are doing Apply Idaho or other things that you're in the classroom, also creating their FSA ID. So like, you have that done prior. So great question, Janelle. Next one, have you heard of a plan for families who have been unable to link to the FAFSA or link their FAFSA to the IRS due to being hacked previously with the IRS, so that they go through like a special track? So right now, oh, go ahead, Bill.
No, yeah. So I do understand this. I've gotten this question before. I think this is something that we're waiting on clarity for, right? This is a I would like for it to be a corner case, right? Because I would like for as few people as possible to have their identities hacked or stolen. But yes, this is something. This is a piece that the FSA is going to have to accommodate in some way. I don't think that we have the details about that, right? But it is something that is on their radar in terms of they're going to have to accommodate, because unfortunately, identity theft is it is a prevailing concern.
Yeah. So again, I think a lot of things still need to be worked out. Those details, and some of the things that, like, I know the big question, of course, is how are undocumented parents going to be able to create an FSA ID? Silvana, to your point, how is someone who's already not been able to use the data retrieval tool, how are they going to now be able to use it? We're hopeful that Federal Student Aid is working all that out. They're getting those details in line, but we just don't have that information right now. So great question.
I see the question from Silvana here. For families with current FAFSA IDs, both for students and parents, will they continue to be active, or will new IDs need to be created? Our understanding is that they will be able to use the ones they already have, but they may need to go through the MFA process if they haven't used them recently, just to confirm them, right? So that you can use the same password, that kind of thing, but you'll need to confirm it through MFA.
Yeah, good question. I think that's where my heart stopped beating a little bit when I started hearing this, is knowing, especially for the students that I used to work with that were low income, first gen, parents are working, parents are wanting to help, but maybe can't come to FAFSA night or whatever. So often that would be that student bringing in their taxes, that student and I sitting down and doing the whole FAFSA together. And that's really not going to be, it's possible, but it's going to be much more difficult to do it that way in the future, because of the role-based forms that students are going to see. They're only going to be allowed to see their student questions unless they log in as if they were the parent, but then they need to have access to the parent's email. There's a lot of considerations, I think, for our low income first generation students who traditionally kind of need a lot more assistance going through the process. So that is something that our office is really trying to think about. We're going to be working with a lot of the financial aid offices at our Idaho institutions to just figure out how can we support you all, because we know you're going to need it. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about that? Any ideas that are coming to mind as you're thinking about how to move forward with all this information? I know it's a lot. Can
I just provide 2 clarifications while we wait for that feedback to come in? Okay, so my colleague Morley Keller, who, if you don't know Morley, she was not. She sends her regards to all of you. She was not able to join this morning, but she's probably one of the 10 smartest people in the country on FAFSA. She's unbelievable. And so I have asked her some of the questions that you all have brought to me. On the questions about identity theft, Morley says they will likely be presented the manual path if there had been identity fraud previously, right? So yes, there is some consideration for the identity theft piece. And on the part about, so you cannot create FSA ID and fill out a FAFSA immediately, Morley notes that you can do a FAFSA with an FSA ID just created, but you will be presented a manual path for questions. But then once the ID is confirmed, FSA will pull over IRS data, and that will overwrite anything that was manually entered, right? So remember, legally, under the FAFSA Simplification Act, the data from the IRS takes precedence over anything self-reported, right? So wherever possible, we're supposed to be using data from the IRS. And so this is a slight revision from what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. You can kind of start the FAFSA process with an FSA ID that was just created and not confirmed. It may not make a whole lot of sense to go too far down that path if the data from the IRS is going to overwrite it anyway. Sorry about that, Jenny.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. I'm so glad Morley's messaging you and giving you the answers in real time.
Yeah.
So one of the questions, and I'm sorry, I answered it in the chat, but I wanted to also say it out loud so you could hear. Someone asked when professional development would be provided to Idaho counselors. Luckily, NCAN is going to be providing some in-person training to states this summer. Some people from our office plan to attend. So we will hopefully it's sort of a train the trainer model. We're going to be getting a lot of training from NCAN on the FAFSA that we can bring back and then provide that training to you all. So our team is currently in the process of figuring out kind of a professional development plan, which will include both some in-person options as well as some virtual options that we can just keep getting as much information out as possible. Hoping for some September in-person trainings as well as online, and then just continued throughout the year. So much of it I really think will be once the new FAFSA opens, really seeing what's going to happen at that point, because so much of it we just don't know until we actually get into the application and see it live. But the plan is, yes, this fall that we will be providing training to Idaho counselors and advisors. So please just, you'll hear from us. I promise we will send out lots of communications about how to sign up for that. So yeah, that's the plan. Let's see, regarding students inputting who will help them complete the form, most likely the parent on that first page. What about a dependent age student who will actually be independent? So, I'm thinking, Janelle, maybe like a homeless student, like who's been identified by their school as a homeless student. Typically, those questions come later in the FAFSA. How would that student enter in a parent? Bill, do you know?
I don't know. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can get a response to you real quick.
Okay, I'll move on to the next one. We'll come back to that one, Janelle. Another question to possibly add a FSA ID category into counselor suite. That's a great idea, Russ. I believe that is something that we could do. I will just need to talk to our data team to make sure we can get that data and then add it to counselor suite, but that's a great idea. And then that way, when you log into counselor suite, you could also see who's created their FSA ID. Love that. Okay, I think I answered most of those questions. Okay, every student, dependent or independent, will complete the student section. They are independent after they answer the question.
So the routing, right? The student section will come first, right? And then the routing then will determine if the student is independent or dependent for FAFSA purposes, right? And so it may be that you could have that you may not need to have kind of other roles represented in the FAFSA completion process, is our understanding. Perfect.
So the student would fill out their section first.
Mm-hmm.
It will be determined if they're an independent or dependent. If dependent, they would add the other roles.
Mm-hmm.
If independent, they just move on. Okay, perfect.
Because the student is going to have to identify other people who should be given access to their FAFSA form, right? So
yeah. And I think, as I was thinking about what would I be telling parents? So if you're thinking about what can I tell the class of 2024, their parents, the big thing that has always kind of been a rule of thumb for this current FAFSA and years prior is if parents are divorced, then you use the parent who the student lives with more out of the year. That definition is now changing. It's the parent who provides more support. So that's a big change that you would probably want to alert your parents to when you're having a parent night, or if you're sending out emails. That's going to be a difference, especially if you're working with a student who maybe has an older sibling in college, and that's not how it was when they filled out the FAFSA. Those are going to be some changes you're going to think about. Will students' parents have to create new FSA IDs for the new FAFSA? No, if they already have a FAFSA from previous years, if they've done a FAFSA, they have an FSA ID, they will still use the same one. However, if they haven't gone through that multi-factor authentication, which is where they get like a text message and an email and they have codes, like they'll have to have that extra level of the multi-factor authentication, but they can still use the same FSA ID that they have already created. I hope that made sense. All right, you guys, well, it is just about 11 o'clock and we so appreciate your time and your questions, and we will try to find as much information as we can to offer you. And like I said, I'll be sending out the recording, the slide deck, and try to highlight any of the questions that were answered or asked and answered today. But please keep sending questions.
Thanks,
Hang in
everyone.
there. It's going to be okay.
It is going to be okay. I
We're gonna
promise. We will get through it together. That's right.